Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and don't forget to click the notification bell so you don't miss out on future deep dives.
Thanks for having me.
We're diving into something really relevant today, whether you're a UPSC aspirant or just curious about how things really work.
Right.
We're looking at formal and informal groups in governance, and we're focusing specifically on India.
Cool.
We've got a ton of research to unpack, so
Yeah.
let's get started.
Yeah.
Okay, so why should this topic even matter to our listeners?
Well, these groups, they're not just some abstract concepts you read about in textbooks. They're
Yeah.
like the actual nuts and bolts of how decisions are made in a society, how policies actually get implemented,
Yeah.
and even how power dynamics really play out.
Yeah,
So understanding them is like getting this behind the scenes look
Yeah.
at how things actually function.
It's like getting a peek behind the curtain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
What's fascinating here is that while formal groups are often the face of governance,
right.
think like your government agencies,
Yeah.
the institutions,
Yeah.
it's the informal groups that often exert a ton of influence behind the scenes,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
And it's the interplay of these two that makes things really interesting
Yes.
and sometimes a bit messy.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Okay, so let's start with some examples of formal groups in India.
Mm.
Our research mentions things like cooperatives,
Right?
especially farmers' cooperatives, dairy cooperatives,
know.
and tribal cooperatives.
Those are big ones.
I mean, can you believe the impact these groups have?
It's huge. Yeah. And it's not just about economics, although
Yeah,
that's definitely a huge factor.
sure.
But, it's also about empowering people,
Mm-hmm.
providing platforms for, collective bargaining, and really giving a voice to those who might otherwise be marginalized.
That's a good point.
Like if you take the example of dairy cooperatives, they've totally revolutionized livelihoods in many Indian states.
That's so true.
Yeah,
It reminds me of a mole.
of course.
Like they've become a national symbol, haven't they?
Absolutely iconic.
And our research also mentions some really prominent formal organizations in India, like the National Cooperative Development Corporation, or NCDC,
Mm-hmm.
IFFCO, the Indian Farmers Fertilizer Cooperative Limited,
Mm.
and TriFed, the Tribal Cooperative Marketing Development Federation of India.
Yeah, some real heavy hitters there.
Yeah, these are big players.
Absolutely. But we got to remember, stability and structure often come with their own set of challenges, right?
Right.
And our sources point out some potential downsides like delays and, rigid hierarchies, and sometimes even a disconnect from the social needs of employees.
Okay, so formal groups have their downsides.
They do.
What about informal groups then?
Mm.
How do they operate differently?
Well, think of informal groups as like the undercurrents of society,
Okay.
It's things like your traditional panchayats, caste associations, religious groups,
Right.
even like your neighborhood sports club.
Yeah.
These all fall under the umbrella of informal groups.
So basically, it's all about relationships and shared values.
Yeah,
And like those unspoken rules that we kind of all follow, right?
exactly.
It's interesting because our research highlighted that leadership in these groups,
Yeah.
it's not about being bossy or anything like that.
Right.
It's more about shared motivations and building trust,
Absolutely.
which is so interesting.
Yeah, but that's also where things can get a bit tricky, right?
How so?
Well, because while informal groups offer speed and flexibility and they can address those social needs that formal groups might miss, they can also be resistant to change and even breed conflict and fuel rumors.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Our sources specifically pointed out the dangers of conformity
Right.
and how it can really undermine individual thinking.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a balancing act, right? You kind of need both types of groups to make a society function effectively.
I think so, yeah.
And our sources were very clear about how both formal and informal groups are crucial in the Indian political landscape.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Think about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Formal groups provide the framework,
Yes.
like the rules of the game,
Exactly.
while informal groups represent the lived experiences of the people, their aspirations,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes even their frustrations.
Yeah, and that interplay is vital.
Yeah.
Especially for issues like social justice, local development,
Yeah.
and holding those in power accountable.
Okay, so we've got this kind of dynamic duo
We do.
working behind the scenes of governance.
Yes.
But how do they actually interact?
Right.
Do they clash?
Mhm.
Do they cooperate?
Yeah, that's a great question, and something we'll delve into in part 2 of our deep dive.
That's good.
Yeah, it's not always, a black and white situation
Right.
like clash or cooperation.
Yeah.
It's more like a dance, I guess.
Okay.
A complex dance.
Okay. With like
Yeah.
moments of harmony and moments of tension and
Exactly.
everything in between.
Yeah.
So how do these groups like step on each other's toes?
Well, imagine for a second,
Wait.
you've got a village panchayat,
Uh-huh.
right? Making a decision
Yeah.
driven by like traditional beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And that decision goes against
Really?
the idea of gender equality,
Right.
which is like enshrined in national law.
Right. So you've got this,
That's a clash right there.
a clash between the informal and the formal.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it makes sense because
Yeah.
the values and norms of informal groups
Right.
aren't always going to align with the formal legal framework.
Exactly.
Right.
And that can create some real friction.
Yeah. Especially when you're talking about issues like social justice.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's not always just about clashing values either, right?
Yeah, I know it's not.
Sometimes the very structure of formal groups can hinder how effective they are on the ground.
Yeah.
They might not have the local knowledge or the flexibility to address,
Yeah.
community needs.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas informal groups,
Yeah.
since they're embedded in the community,
Exactly.
they can bridge that gap.
Yeah.
Our research mentions how informal groups can be
Mm-hmm.
like this powerful force for social change,
Yeah.
especially when they mobilize people around a common cause.
Yes.
It's like they're giving a voice to those who might otherwise be overlooked by the formal systems.
Absolutely.
Think about like women's self-help groups
Oh, yeah. Great example.
in rural India.
Mm.
They might not have any official status,
Right.
but they've been so important for empowering women,
Nice. Yeah.
promoting financial inclusion,
Mm.
and just driving development at the grassroots level.
Yeah, and sometimes these informal groups even act as a check on the power of formal institutions.
On watchdogs, almost. That might be ignored by the formal systems.
Yes.
They can mobilize public opinion
Mm-hmm.
and even advocate for policy changes.
Absolutely. So, you see, it's not just a one-way street
Right.
where informal groups are influencing formal institutions.
Mhm.
It goes both ways.
Yeah, so formal institutions rely
Yeah.
on informal networks.
Yeah, for information, feedback, even for
Yeah.
implementing policies.
So give me an example.
Let's say you have a government program
Okay.
that's trying to improve sanitation.
Mm,
They might rely on local community leaders and
right.
social networks
Okay.
to spread awareness
Yeah.
and encourage people to actually adopt the new practices.
So it's like this symbiotic relationship where each side benefits
Yeah.
from the other.
Mm-hmm.
And this becomes even more crucial
Yeah.
when we talk about civil society organizations.
Right.
Our research talked about how they play
Yes.
a key role in bridging this gap
Mhm.
between the formal and informal. So remind me, what are civil society organizations or
Yeah.
CSOs exactly?
They're those formal groups,
Okay.
often nonprofits,
Uh-huh.
and they work on all sorts of social issues.
Yeah, like,
Environmental protection, women's rights, education,
okay,
healthcare,
gotcha.
you name it.
So they're part of the formal structure,
They are.
but they work directly with communities,
Yeah,
tapping into those informal networks and relationships.
exactly.
So they kind of act like a bridge,
yeah.
channeling those voices and concerns of the people
Mm-hmm.
to those in power.
To the policymakers.
Yeah.
Advocating for their needs,
Mm-hmm.
holding the formal systems accountable.
And they can be really effective,
They can.
especially when they combine
Yeah.
their formal expertise
Mhm.
with that local knowledge and
Exactly.
trust
Yeah.
that informal groups bring to the table.
It's like they're combining the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
And, for our listeners who are thinking about joining the civil services, understanding this interplay
Yeah.
between formal and informal groups is super important.
It's crucial
Yeah.
if you want to be in a role
right.
that involves.
Policymaking, implementation.
Yeah.
Or even just understanding, the dynamics of governance.
Yeah.
You got to grasp how these different forces interact
Right.
and influence each other.
It's not just about knowing the rules and the regulations.
No, it's not. It's
Yeah.
about understanding the social fabric,
Yeah.
the power dynamics,
Mhm.
and those networks that are operating beneath the surface.
So it's like
Yeah.
you get to see the bigger picture,
Exactly.
the human element
Mm-hmm.
behind the systems and the structures.
Yeah,
This is fascinating.
it is.
This is so relevant
It is.
and crucial for anyone who wants to make a difference
I think so too.
in the world,
Mm-hmm.
whether they're working in the civil services or just being a citizen.
Yeah, an informed and engaged citizen.
This has been really insightful.
I'm glad.
But I want to know, can you give me some real-world examples where this interplay between formal and informal groups has a positive impact?
That's a great question and something we'll explore further in part 3 of our deep dive. You were asking about real-world examples where this interplay between formal and informal groups makes a difference.
Yeah, like where it has a positive impact.
Okay, well, look at the success of India's pulse polio immunization program.
Oh, yeah.
That wasn't just about a well-structured government initiative, right?
Right.
It was about mobilizing local communities, religious leaders, even those informal networks of mothers who, share information, advice.
Right, so they tapped into those existing social structures.
Exactly.
And then they were able to reach, like, even the most remote areas and overcome that hesitancy.
Absolutely.
That some formal campaigns
sometimes face.
It's a classic example of how combining the reach and resources of the government with that trust and influence of informal groups can lead to really incredible outcomes.
That's amazing.
It is.
It's like these two separate worlds can actually complement each other.
They can.
And achieve something really impactful.
And it's not just limited to public health initiatives.
Oh.
Think about, like, disaster relief efforts.
Okay.
When a natural disaster strikes, it's often those local communities, those informal networks of neighbors and volunteers who are the first responders.
Makes sense.
Providing immediate support, aid.
While the formal systems take some time.
Yeah, they can be a little slower.
To mobilize and reach those affected areas.
Exactly.
So it's those critical early hours where it's the informal groups that step up.
They do.
And it shows you that resilience.
And sense of community that you see in times of crisis.
Absolutely.
It's like a reminder that governance isn't just about top-down structures.
No, it's not.
It's also about those bottom-up forces.
Yeah, shape how we respond to challenges. And support each other.
And for our listeners who are prepping for the UPSC exams, these real-world examples are so valuable.
They are.
Or show that you understand not just the theoretical concepts, but how they play out.
In real life.
In the real world.
Exactly.
It's about going beyond the textbook. And showing that you can, like, connect the dots.
Analyze those complexities. Offer insights that go beyond the surface.
It's about seeing the bigger picture.
Right.
The human element behind the systems and structures.
It's not just about acing an exam.
No, it's about becoming a more effective leader, a more informed policymaker, a more engaged citizen.
Because at the end of the day, governance is about people. It's about their needs.
Their aspirations and how all these systems can work together to create a more just
and equitable
society.
Well said.
This deep dive has been incredible. We've really explored this intricate dance between formal and informal groups. We've seen how they can clash, cooperate, complement each other in ways that impact our lives.
Our communities.
Our nation.
It really has been a fascinating exploration.
And hopefully it sparked some curiosity.
I hope so.
For our listeners. To keep learning.
To keep questioning. Keep diving deeper.
So whether you're a UPSC aspirant, or student, or just someone who's passionate about understanding how things work. Keep exploring. Look around in your own communities. Observe those formal and informal dynamics.
Absolutely.
And think about how you can engage to make a positive difference.
Governance isn't just about those in power, right?
Right.
It's about all of us.
It is?
It's about participating, engaging, contributing to the well-being of our society.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss another episode.
Yes, please do.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deeper.